Hey everyone, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And for the final time in 2024, this will be my last video to upload in said calendar year of 2024. And I can't believe I have not done this before, but I figured, being that I'm a Calgary sports fan, and this is the time of year where we reflect upon everything that all the news stations and sports stations do a year in review. So in this video, I'm going to do a Calgary sports year in review, looking at all the major teams in Calgary, and I'll ask, which team do you think in Calgary had the best 2024? Various factors on team performance and expectations and what they ultimately achieved, and I'll touch upon what I think the outlook will be on said team that I'll talk about in this video. But before I get into the year in review, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe, and here's my other links in the description below for other ways you can follow me. And also, interestingly, there's actually an Instagram account called Calgary Sports. It's Calgary Sports, one word, with Z at the end. I'll make sure I put that in the description below. It summarizes, per week, on how each Calgary team is doing at a given point in time. So we'll take a look at all the teams, touch upon major news stories in Calgary. I think it's obvious for the 2024 year what the top story is going to be, but I'll bring up the notes. And actually, there's going to be 8 teams in total that I'm going to touch upon on my year in review for 2024. And the Calgary sports point of view kind of summarizes my personal 2024. Most of the year was a so-so year, but had some good points. Did have my first ever trip to Toronto, but I'm going to say the major teams had a rough year. However, some not so headwind-grabbing team, as I meant to say, had pretty good years. And I'll say, what's your team or teams of the year for 2024? First, we'll talk about the Calgary Flames, the main team at Calgary, the one that gets the most headlines. So, how did Calgary do in 2024? I'm going to look at mostly the first bit of 2024, the 23-24 part of the season. Then the outlook would be kind of like beyond the rest of the year, going to 2025. But we could say for the Calgary Flames this past year, it was the first season that we were with Ryan Huska as head coach and Craig Conroy as general manager. Spoiler alert, the Calgary Flames will not be my 2024 team of the year because we did not make the playoffs. As the overall record for the Calgary Flames, they were 38 wins, 39 losses, and 5 overtime or shootout losses. So they collected 81 points in the standings at home. They actually were a respectable 21-19-1, so just above 500 at home. And then on the road, they were 17-20-4, so below 500. So all that added up, they were still one game under 500, at least what we call, or the hockey guy calls it, NHL 500. It did put them 5th in the Pacific Division and 11th in the Western Conference, and actually they missed the playoffs by 17 points this past year. I suppose the year before they just missed by 2 points and actually had 1 more point than the Florida Panthers in 2023, and we know how the Panthers did in 2023. But I felt like going in this season, it was with the new head coach and general manager, with Ryan Huska's head coach, Craig Conroy's general manager, and I would say that was probably what the organization needed. Who led the team in scoring was Nazem Kadri. He had 75 points. And actually, if you look back on Nazem Kadri's career, it was actually his second most productive points season, only behind his last season in Colorado, where he actually was almost on pace for 100 points and led the Avalanche to the Cup in 2022 before we signed him. And I'm going to say the average attendance for the Calgary Flames, well, we still had a fairly full Saladome. It was 17,490 that I could find both on Hockey Database, which is the site that I found the attendance on. The question that we could still ask for the Calgary Flames, are we actually rebuilding or retooling? That is still the loaded question from all the assets that the team sold off towards the trade deadline. When we trade away, we trade away Zorov, Lindholm, Tanev, and Hanifin, and then the off-season where we sold off Markstrom and Mangiapane to collect assets in that, as well as prospects. So we still have veterans like Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson, and Michael Backlund being the captain. So, I did make a video just before Christmas talking how I felt the Calgary Flames are at now. That I'm going to say we are rebuilding, but we didn't strip down everything to the foundation and build up. And I do feel in a couple of years, if things progress, that I think this team will be in a better position. And then, just for the record, in 2024, and I'll keep it real, I was a big Florida Panthers fan for a couple weeks, as they did win the Stanley Cup over the Edmonton Oilers. So that's basically the Calgary Flames season in a nutshell, as we did not make the playoffs for 2024, but I feel with the new regime and all the assets that we sold off and all the prospects that we drafted from the draft, and you can see my separate videos from that, I think this team is going in the right direction as long as they trust the process and go along, and I feel that we have an intelligent enough fan base that I'm going to say that we are willing to go with it. And as of this recording, we're actually in the hunt for a playoff spot. Not out in a playoff spot, but we're not totally out of it either to be a draft pick, so you can debate on that. So that was what I have for the Calgary Flames year review in 2024. So we did not make the playoffs. However, I feel this team is going in the right direction as long as you don't do anything too drastic to wave off the plan and the process. So the next team to talk about is the Calgary Stampeders, and I'm going to say the Calgary Stampeders, spoiler alert, they're also not going to be the Calgary Team of the Year, because I don't think they had a good 2024. In fact, they had the worst season since 2004, the tail end of the F-Troop days, where this was the first time since 2004, when the Calgary was still sobering up from the Stanley Cup run the Calgary Flames had. The Calgary Stampeders missed the playoffs, and indeed, the Calgary Stampeders did miss the playoffs in 2024. They had a record of 5 wins, 12 losses, and a tie. Got through a tie in there. Actually, at home, they were respectable 4-4-1. So at least at home, we enjoyed some home field advantage. However, on the road, Calgary was 1-8. And it looked like Calgary was going to go for the imperfect road record, but we won the one game on the road. Last game of the regular season, that was against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, when both teams had nothing to play for in that game because Calgary was out and Saskatchewan knew they were going to be playing the next week at home against the BC Lions. And you can obviously take a look at my On the Road to the Grey Cup videos where I did preview all the playoff games minus my Calgary Stampeders. With that record, the Calgary Stampeders had the worst record in the CFL They were 5th in the West Division, and interestingly, this was the first year since I believe it was 1945, if I got it right, that both Alberta-based teams missed the playoffs, did not get to participate in the CFL playoffs for the Grey Cup, which is actually kind of incredible to think about. It just says that both teams, either one team was still dominant one era, other team wasn't, and both teams were dominant at the same time. But ultimately, the Calgary Stampeders, after 19 straight seasons in the playoffs, they missed for the first time since 2004. Some would say that was the longest streak in professional sports in North America. So 19 years, it's still nothing to complain about. But I mean, I guess most CFL fans aren't going to feel too sorry for me. I admit I have been spoiled a little in the last quarter decade. And then of the 27 seasons that I've had season tickets, this was only the 4th time Calgary missed the playoffs. But that being said, the average attendance at McMahon Stadium, what I found was 21,541, I shall say. Which I say attendance has dropped a little, but the team also says that it's been fairly flat the last few years. I mean, enough that the top sections in each corner, they have tarped it off, and I don't remember the last time there was over 30,000 fans in attendance at McMahon Stadium outside of the 109th Grey Cup, 107th Grey Cup, let's say, in 2019, where that stadium was sold out, but that was because of the big game. I don't remember the last time we had over 30,000 fans at a regular season Calgary Stampeders game. So despite the fact that we did not make the playoffs this season, and there was a survey that was asked for me about what was the highlight of the 2024 season, and I'm going to say there wasn't really much to highlight. I had to say the Wally Bono Wall of Fame induction. The long overdue Wall of Fame induction for Wally Bono. His name is forever up on the east side as a builder with the Calgary Stampeders, and well deserved. Former head coach and general manager. That was when the team became a flagship franchise. When Wally Bono took over, the reason why it took so long is that Wally Bono actually admitted it himself. There was a few times that the Stampeders approached him to say, hey, we want to do this, but at that time he was still actively either coaching, working with the BC Lions, or working in some capacity in the CFL, so I get that he waited until he was no longer employed anywhere in the CFL where he can actually enjoy his Wall of Fame induction. And then I've also made other videos on that you can debate about that going into 2025. We decided to keep Dave Dickinson as head coach and general manager. I've already made a few videos about decisions on the coaches that we decided to move on from and the coaches that we added in. And then before doing this year in review, we made 2 big decisions at quarterback, that we acquired Vernon Adams Jr. from the BC Lions. So I think he's going to be, he's going to, be our number 1 quarterback going into 2025. Because literally last week, just before Christmas, the Calgary Stampeders traded away Jake Mayer to his rights to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So I'm going to say the outlook for the Calgary Stampeders in 2025 is, we don't know at this stage. It's going to a lot depend on free agency, and I think the Calgary Stampeders, while they always traditionally look at taking care of internal business ahead of free agency, but I think the Stampeders need to be more aggressive in free agency, and maybe with getting Vernon Adams Jr. here, and he's also known as being a recruiter, so that could play a role, and I'll try to make a video when the time comes. And then the fact that the Calgary Stampeders, I'll mention this is one of the top stories of this year, is that in 2026 we will be hosting the 113th Grey Cup. Of course, I'm excited about that. That might also give motivation for the team to build towards to try to be a competitive team that year. Because it would be nice if one of these years we host the Grey Cup, we're playing in it, and then win it. So we'll see how that goes. And then when it comes to the CFL, ultimately it was the Toronto Argonauts that won the Grey Cup in Vancouver last month. It would be the 111th Grey Cup as the Toronto Argonauts defeated the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for the Grey Cup in a surprising upset win, as Winnipeg has been in the last 5 Grey Cups, while Toronto's won 2 of the last 3 with Nick Arbuckle as quarterback. And you can look back at my videos when I did the On the Road to the Grey Cup, including recapping the Grey Cup. So that's the Calgary Stampeders year in review, as I shall say. So the next team we'll talk about is our junior team, the Calgary Hitmen. And just like the Calgary Flames and the Calgary Stampeders, the Calgary Hitmen, they had a rough season as well, but it's a different animal when it comes to junior hockey and this we have at the time. I mean, some teams, they have that short window if you have talented generational players and who you can acquire that could make a run for a championship and a Royal Cup. But overall, the Calgary Hitmen, they only play 68 games in the Western Hockey League and all the Canadian Hockey League teams. Well, the Calgary Hitmen, they won 28 games, they lost 31, and have 8 overtime or shootout points. So they had 65 points overall. That put them 5th in the Central Division in the Western Hockey League and 9th in the Eastern Conference. They actually only missed the playoffs by 2 points, so the Calgary Hitmen almost actually made the playoffs despite the record. And keep in mind, of the 22 teams in the Western Hockey League, 16 do make the playoffs and upsets could happen, but the Hitmen did not make the playoffs. Oliver Tulk, he led the team in scoring with 80 points and the average attendance. Keep in mind, this is junior hockey, where you have 16 to 20-year-olds throughout the league. We had 4,529 on average. However, it's not all doom and gloom with the Calgary Hitmen, because Carter Yakimchuk, he actually got drafted in the top 10 in this past NHL Interdraft. He was drafted 7th overall by the Ottawa Senators, and if I'm not mistaken, Carter Yakimchuk is actually the first Calgary Hitmen player to play his junior hockey that was drafted in the top 10, I think, since Pavel Brendel. If you go back to the draft it would have been 1999 that he was drafted 4th overall. I believe it was, 1999. He was drafted 4th overall. Pavel Brendel, he was very, very one-dimensional. He could score everything, but he didn't have a good defense. Other players that, notable Calgary Hitmen alumni, I mean, Ryan Getzlaff, but I'm looking at just top 10. And of course, Michael Stone played here, both at the Hitmen and the Flames. And you got to think of Andrew Ladd, as well as Martin Jones. Well, those are the more notable Calgary Hitmen alumni. But Carter Yakimchuk, he has not played in the National Hockey League yet, but that's the one highlight I could put on the Calgary Hitmen this past season. There was some changes that have happened within the Calgary Hitmen, as the Calgary Hitmen decided to move on from Steve Hamilton as head coach. He was brought in as coach for the Calgary Hitmen, started in the 2018-19 season. He did spend some time coaching the Edmonton Oil Kings to some success, but he had more talented teams, so the Hitmen moved on from Steve Hamilton after last season, and they brought in Paul McFarland as head coach, and so far the Hitmen have actually been looking a lot better in a tighter competitive Central Division. And then when it comes to championships, well, ultimately for the Western Hockey League Championship, the WHL Championship, it was the Moose Jaw Warriors. They won their first WHL Championship over the Portland Winterhawks. For the record, the Calgary Hitmen has won 2 WHL championships in 1999 and 2010, and did not win the Memorial Cup. The Memorial Cup was won by the Ontario Hockey League Saginaw Spirit. They won that over the London Knights, also in the Ontario Hockey League. And interesting to mention about the Saginaw Spirit, Flames prospect Zane Perek was on that team. So basically, that is the Calgary Hitmen story in a nutshell. The fact that they did not make the playoffs, despite having Kari Yakupchuk getting drafted in the top 10 in the most recent NHL Inch draft. I will not put them as team of the year, but we still got 5 more teams to look at before I come to the conclusion who I think is my pick for the Calgary team of the year. So that is the Hitmen. So the next team we'll take a look at, still plays at the Dome. We'll take a look at the NLL's Calgary Roughnecks. And the Calgary Roughnecks, I mean, me personally, last season happened to be the last season I had season tickets, but I only managed to go to 1 game and decided to cancel my season tickets because it just didn't make sense if I couldn't make it to any more games. And I'll review a product that I'll talk about when I talk about the top stories. But this past season, the Calgary Roughnecks was also moving on from Kurt Malowski as head coach, as Kurt Malowski was head coach of the Calgary Roughnecks, including being a player on the 2009 team that won the championship and being the coach in 2019. Well, his contract was up, and ultimately he decided to move to the Vancouver Warriors to be closer to home. So this past season, for the 2024 season, it was the first season with Josh Sanderson as head coach of the Calgary Roughnecks, and also the NLL. What they did for playoff format is they had the whole conference format, because there's 13 teams, or now there's 15 teams that play in the NLL now. Top 8 made the playoffs, and Calgary actually was on the wrong end of a lot of tiebreakers, as Calgary was 8-10 in the NLL last season. They were 6-3 at home in the Roughhouse, but they were 2-7 on the road, so that definitely sunk the Calgary Roughnecks, which put them 11th overall. They were also on the wrong end of many tiebreakers, so they did miss the playoffs after in 2023, where they made the run to the conference championship, where they eventually lost to the Colorado Mammoth 2-1 in the best of 3 series. The average attendance is, I just found 12,000 plus. They usually get about 12,000 a game, and me personally, I did go to the home opener of the Calgary Roughnecks a few days ago, and they got over 13,000 fans in attendance, and actually it was against the Vancouver Warriors, coached by Kurt Malowski. But right now, the big names that Calgary has moved on from last season to this season was Dan Taylor, and then CDB, Christian Del Bianco. However, there are some kind of complexities with the fact that they franchise tagged him, but he hasn't been in dispute with the contract, so he has not been signed by the Roughnecks. However, based on what I saw at the home opener, I think we're going to miss him if we aren't able to get Christian Del Bianco back. But actually, we were able to get Curtis Superman Dixon and Dayton Dobie back. However, in the offseason, I felt we paid too high of a price to get Curtis Superman Dixon back when it comes to giving up future draft picks, and then we were able to get Dean Dobie. So we got a couple greats back with the Calgary Roughnecks this season, but I'm not too sure what 2025 is looking for after 2024. But once again, it was another transition year for the Calgary Roughnecks. They're not going to be, obviously, my pick for Calgary team of 2024. Now, when it comes to the NLL Championship, actually the Buffalo Bandits, they were able to successfully defend their title because they won the title in 2023 over the Colorado Mammoth after the Mammoth beat the Calgary Roughnecks. But the Buffalo Bandits, actually it was kind of a New York battle because Buffalo won it over the Albany Firewolves. So the Buffalo Bandits, I believe they've won 6 NLL titles in total. However, Calgary did manage to beat Buffalo twice in the NLL Championship, go back to 2004 and in 2019. In both those cases, it was actually kind of a pleasant surprise that the Calgary Roughnecks won those championships last season. So that's my quick review of the Calgary Roughnecks. So we still have 4 more teams to go. So let's take a look at the next team that I'll talk about. The next team, talk about, also playing the Dome, is the Calgary Wranglers. And unlike all the other teams that I've mentioned before, this team, I'm going to say, had a little bit of a better season in terms of they actually made the playoffs. Well, the Calgary Wranglers this past season, it was their first season with Trent Cull as head coach after Mitch Love, who went to the Washington Capitals to be an assistant coach. And actually, the Calgary Wranglers had the best record in the Pacific Division at the time of the new year going into 2024. So Trent Cull was able to coach in the All-Star game. But ultimately, the Calgary Wranglers did all right, considering we had players that graduated to the Calgary Flames, most notably Dustin Wolf, Connor Zary, and Martin Pospisil. But last season, the Wranglers, they had 35 wins, 28 losses, and then they break down the AHL standings with, they had 6 overtime and 3 shootout losses, so it was 25, 8, 6, 3 for 79 points. That did put them 7th in the Pacific Division, but the AHL has a more expanded playoff format. As I mentioned, they were first at the All-Star break, so things were looking good then, but with the AHL to be a developmental team for the Calgary Flames, players who get called up to the big team, the Calgary Flames, you're going to have to try to replenish your talent organizationally. As I mentioned, they did make the playoffs, but they lost in the division semifinals, so at least they got out of the wildcard round. It was Adam Klapka who actually led the team in scoring with 46 points. Average attendance, they only had 3,514, but the Wranglers do also play some games at some odd start times. And I mentioned many players graduate to the Flames. This shows success. Most notable, Connor Zary, Martin Pospisil, and Dustin Wolf were the ones that stayed with the Calgary Flames. Other players, like a Matt Coronado, starting to look like he is going to be more of a permanent fixture on the Calgary Flames. Maybe you could say the same about Jacob Pelche. Walker Dewar and Adam Klapka, they're always up and down, so we do have some players from the last few years that have played the Wranglers that are also making their way up to the Calgary Flames. When it comes to the playoffs, well, in the first round, we did pull off a little bit of an upset, as it was 2 versus 7 matchup. We actually beat the Tucson Roadrunners, which then they were the Arizona Coyotes farm team, and I'm not too sure if they are still the farm team for the Utah Hockey Club now. But we did win 2-0. However, our nemesis in the first round, in the semifinals, we lost 3-1. This is the best of 5 series against the Coachella Valley Thunderbirds, or Firebirds, I should say. The Coachella Valley Firebirds, who is the Seattle Kraken farm team, and actually it's the 2nd year in a row. The Calgary Wranglers season ended thanks to the Coachella Valley Firebirds, and actually for the championship for the 2nd straight year, it was the Hershey Bears that defeated the Coachella Valley Firebirds, and it was 4-2, and it was the 2nd straight win for both Hershey and the 2nd straight year that matchup happened. The year before, actually, it did a Game 7 in overtime, and then the Hershey Bears are the farm team for the Washington Capitals. So, and the Washington Capitals are looking like to be one of the top teams in the NHL right now. How the outlook looks for the Calgary Wranglers now is actually the Calgary Wranglers are the top team in the American Hockey League, and actually of the coaching shuffle because of Brad Larson. With the Calgary Flames, Trent Cull is now the interim assistant coach, and actually Joe Cirella is the head coach. He'll be coaching in the All-Star game, and actually 3 of the last 4 years, the Pacific Division head coach has been represented by the Calgary Wranglers. So the Calgary Wranglers have had a strong showing since they've relocated from Stockton. Since setting up shop here in Calgary, it's definitely very handy to have the farm team in the same city as the parent team. So the Calgary Wranglers, I'm going to say they are in the running for potentially being the Calgary Team of the Year. But I still got 3 more teams to talk about, shall we? So the next team we'll talk about is going to be the Calgary Canucks. Yeah, there was a joke a few years ago of all the free agents that we poached from the Vancouver Canucks. Say, well, you might as well call the Calgary Flames the Calgary Canucks. Well, actually, we do have a hockey team called the Calgary Canucks. They are in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. I'm going to say it's a step below the Western Hockey League. Most notable player that I could say that played in the Alberta Junior Hockey League that is having a successful career in the NHL is Cale Makar, who was with the Colorado Avalanche. Played here in Calgary. Well, he's from here in Calgary. He did play for the Okotoks Oilers. I'm going to say he does have a Conn Smythe and a Stanley Cup in Norris, or is always a favorite to win the Norris. So there's some credibility to the Alberta Junior Hockey League. But the Calgary Canucks, actually, are coached by Hitmen great Brad Moran, who actually has his number 20 retired by the team. The Calgary Canucks, they actually had a successful season. They had 31 wins, 23 losses, 1 overtime and 2 shield losses. They had 65 points, and they were 3rd overall in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. Not only they made the playoffs, they actually won the AJHL championship, so they're definitely now in the running to be the Calgary Team of the Year. As mentioned, Bowden Singleton was leading scorer with 67 points. I never actually caught a Calgary Canucks game in person, but they what I found for average attendance was 367. I forget if they renamed the arena now, but it's been always known as the Max Bell Arena, which is near Barlow Trail and Memorial Drive. But the Calgary Canucks, they did win the championship. In the first round, they won 4-2 over the Grand Prairie Storm. And then the second round, they won 4-1 over the Drumheller Dragons. And then for the championship, they swept the Whitecourt Wolverines 4-0. So the Calgary Canucks, they did win the AJHL championship, and they're the only Calgary-based team in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. We used to have the Calgary Royals, but that team, when I did my Remember the Calgary series, moved to Black Falls. So the Calgary Canucks is actually one of the more successful teams in winning championships in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. Actually, I believe this is their first championship since 1995, and actually Calgary is going to host the Centennial Cup in 2025. So the Calgary Canucks, of all the teams so far we touched upon and reviewing, are looking like to be the team of the year. But I got 2 more teams to talk about before I talk about top stories and who I think I'll give the crown, or crowns. There could be more than one crown in this case on Team of the Year. So this team we'll now talk about is the Calgary Surge. The Calgary Surge, second team that professional basketball is back in Calgary. This is the Canadian Elite Basketball League. And actually the Calgary Surge, that team relocated from Guelph, Ontario. And that team was formerly known as the Nighthawks. And for the second season of the Calgary Surge in the Canadian Elite Basketball League, and they have the Elam ending as what they do is this league. I haven't caught a game, and I first learned about it actually when I went to the home opener with a friend from the past that he went to some Calgary Surge games, and they play at Winsport. I haven't been to a Surge game. It's quite a ways for me to get there. But in the final 4 minutes of the fourth quarter, they turn off the game clock. The shot clock is still played, but they take the team that has the lead, and then they add 10 points to that number and call it a target score, and then the first team to that said number wins the game. That kind of, takes out the, foul and all the, free throw shots. That seems to slow the game down like the NBA. Especially if it's a tight NBA game where it seems like it takes a half an hour to play the last 10 seconds of the game. That seems to be the idea of the Elam ending and the target score. But this is the first season that we had Tyrell Vernon as head coach of the Calgary Surge. And overall, the team actually finished 11-9, and they were third in the West Division. Was enough to make the playoffs. But this year they lost in the semifinals. The first season that the Calgary Surge was after they relocated from Guelph, they actually lost the final, so they took a step back in the playoffs, but at least made the playoffs. There was a play-in round as they first defeated Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Sea Bears, 84-82. And then in the quarterfinals, we won 78-69 over the Edmonton Stingers. It's just a one-game playoff. However, our run ended as we lost 89-87 over the Vancouver Bandits. However, the Vancouver Bandits, they lost to the Niagara River Lions to win the CEBL championship. And I understand some games get televised on TSN, but that's just a little touch on the Calgary Surge. So I'm going to say they've had a successful second season in Calgary. Couldn't find anything about attendance numbers, but they play 18 games in the season over the spring and the summer. Always skeptical on how well basketball will do in Calgary, as we did have some professional teams. I still say the most notable professional team, if you go back to remember the Calgary series, is when we had the Calgary 88s, and then the rule of that league was you had to be shorter than 6'5", and then we had the Drillers, and then we had the Crush. So this is another attempt for professional basketball in Calgary. I don't think Calgary is a big enough market to be in the National Basketball Association, and I just can't see, if we were, I just can't quite see, a superstar like a Michael Jordan, LeBron James, if they become free agents and say, instead of playing, let's say, somewhere in Southern California, I'm going to Calgary, baby. I just don't see that happen. The culture, I just still feel is not there right now. I mean, when I did go to Toronto, I did feel that culture a lot more. And actually, when I walked out from the Billy Bishop Airport, because I went to that airport to land and fly in out of, there was a park that had a basketball court that I saw nearby, the Billy Bishop Airport. They also have a basketball court made finally in that Century Gardens behind 8th Street Station. That seemed like it took forever to get done, but I don't think Calgary's a big enough market to compete in the National Basketball Association, but there's a little bit of Calgary basketball in my year in review. So one more team that we'll talk about is our local soccer team, the Cavalry FC. Me personally, I've never been to a Cavalry FC where they play in the Canadian Elite, the Canadian Elite Soccer League, or I think that's what it's called. It's a step below the MLS because they play at Spruce Meadows, which that is quite a hike, but I'm going to say the Canadian Premier League, the CPL. So that's where the Calgary FC play in. And as I know, there's still 8 teams in that league. But the Calgary FC, they had a pretty good 2024, if you ask me. They had 12 wins, 12 draws, and 4 losses. Good enough to put them second in the CPL and made the playoffs. Top 4 made the playoffs. And actually, not only they made the playoffs, they won their first ever CPL championship. Because the first year when the Calgary FC were in the CPL, they lost the championship game at home. However, they did make amends this year, as it was Tobias Warasinski. If I said his name right, he led the team with 15 goals. The average attendance for Calgary FC games, keep in mind the Spruce Meadow grounds, I think can only hold 5,000 anyway, got 4,223. So how the playoffs work for the Calgary FC is the first semifinal they won 1-0 over the Forge FC, which that team is based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and we have developed a rivalry with Forge over the time. And then in the second semifinal, because Calgary advanced to the final, the second semifinal game determined who Calgary was going to play in said championship, and it was the Forge FC. They won 2-1 over Atletico Ottawa, which that team obviously is based out of Ottawa. What's interesting is the Cavalry FC play at Spruce Meadows, while the Hamilton team, the Ottawa team, and the Winnipeg team, they play at their same stadiums that their CFL teams play in. I know the university owns McMahon Stadium, so it set up the championship team where we were playing on the Forge FC, and the Cavalry FC, they won 2-1 over the Forge FC, so we got the CPL title. Not quite sure what it mentions next, but their Cavalry, as meant to say, will play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup in 2025 with this win. So I'm going to say, of the teams that I've talked about and did a quick review on, the Calgary FC and the Calgary Canucks, they're in the running. Though I'm going to say to be the Calgary Team of the Year, because both of those teams won their respective championships. And before I crown who I think is the Calgary Team of the Year, let's talk about Calgary sports stories, big stories that have happened over the year before I crown the team. So top stories, well, early in the year, obviously the one big story is the Flames selling off all their assets, as it looked like the Calgary Flames weren't good enough to make the playoffs and have very, very big decisions with upcoming unrestricted free agents. Well, he sold them off. Started off with Nikita Zadorov and then Elias Lindholm, and then throw in Chris Tanev and Noah Hannafin. And then in the off season, we decided it was best to move on from Andrew Mangiapane, and then we also traded away Jacob Markstrom. There was some rift about how Markstrom was being approached on waiving his no movement clause, and didn't happen. But the big reason why we felt it was time to maybe potentially move on from Jacob Markstrom was to give our younger goalies a chance to play. And so far it looks like it's paying off, especially with Dustin Wolf's case. So that's one story that I'll touch upon. This one has a little ugly story to it, but one player that isn't going to be returning to the Calgary Flames, or hasn't returned, it started off as he needed to take some mental time off. And we're not talking about Oliver Shillington, and you can probably throw that story in there about Oliver Shillington coming back from whatever he had to deal with, and then ultimately he decided to sign in Colorado. But we're talking about Dylan Dubé. Yeah, Dylan Dubé. This could be a big enough story. We can also talk about that. He is one of the 5 players that are allegedly, there's still a court case. Oh, apparently I hear it's in April 2025. But he's one of the 5 players that were on that World Junior team that did some inappropriate stuff with the opposite sex. So I'll just leave it at that. Allegedly, until it's proven in court of law. And I think he was actually the captain of that team. So Dylan Dubé, unfortunately, has to deal with this in 2025. There's 5 other players. I know Carter Hart is one of the players that was with the Philadelphia Flyers, and I think there were 2 Devils. I don't have all the names here, but this is just looking from a Calgary point of view, but that was also brought up in the news early in the year. And then towards the middle of the year, we finally got things going on the new arena, and we're going to be calling it the Scotia Place. That's going to be built immediately north of the Scotiabank Saddledome, and expected to be open for action starting in the 2027-28 season. So at least we got that stabilized, the arena situation figured out after all the politics behind the scenes was figured out, and figuring out, moving the utilities, who's paying for it. Ultimately, the whole thing is going to cost $1.2 billion, and the provincial government is willing to put in $300 million, mostly all the utility work, and then there's apparently work around building a new union station nearby, where if you ever get these Green Line thing sorted out, and then also collaborate with the Flames, the province, and the Stampede, where the Calgary Stampede also exchanged some land for the Scotia Place. So at least we finally got all that figured out. I just didn't get around to making a video on it, and it gets a lot busier in that area now that I've noticed to just do a vlogging on the go. It was easier for me to do that at the time, and also just some nostalgia with the Stampede Corral being knocked down. But the new BMO Center expansion is all done and open now, and then, as I said, the progress is being made on Scotia Place. And then I also touched upon Hitman Calgary Yakimchuk. He got drafted 7th overall in this upcoming draft, or this past draft, as I meant to say, with the Ottawa Senators. I think it's big to highlight any young players that we watched playing for the Hitmen actually get recognized by all the hockey scouts and get put on national TV, drafted in the first round, get his name called to the podium and put a jersey over his head and pose at the brass. So congratulations to Calgary Yakimchuk. And then another thing that I'll eventually make a video on is actually Calgary introduced this thing called Flex Club. Yeah, Flex Club, and actually I'll have to make a video on it. It's a Flex Club where you have a choice to buy either a $200 or a $500 voucher, and it allows you to pick games between the Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Wranglers. And I'm going to say for me that might be perfect for, as an alternative to having season tickets for the Roughnecks. I'll break it down even more in that video. That I haven't bought it yet because it's not like a season ticket where you have a chance to pay it in installments. It's an upfront payment, and sometimes it gets a little difficult in this economy with everything else that you have your financial obligations for. But it's one of the unique things that was introduced in the Calgary market, the Calgary Flex Club. You might have seen advertisements for it on the digital advertising boards if you're looking at the Flames website, or even just with the Flames. But that's what it is. It's basically you buy a voucher of a certain amount, and you get to pick games of those 3 teams. And if you would have bought a $500 voucher soon enough, you would have had a $50 food coupon. But that could be more perfect for me, considering obviously I get too busy at times in the wintertime where I missed more Calgary Roughnecks and games than attended. And then a couple more stories is last month Calgary is going to be hosting the 113th Grey Cup. Yeah, that's going to be definitely excited about that. Not need to travel for the Grey Cup, not have to worry about accommodations and that. And just, the fun, the camaraderie, celebrating with other CFL fans and how it was done in 2019. It did feel like a mini Stampede in November, especially how we utilized the convention center at the time, and now with the expanded BMO Center. I'm going to be intrigued how they're going to pull that off, the Grey Cup Rodeo. So I'm looking forward to that, the big game, plus the events leading up to the big game. And then 2 more stories I'll touch upon is the Vernon Adams Jr. trade. The Calgary Stampeders getting Vernon Adams Jr. to show that, we were disappointed in how the team performed the last couple seasons, and feel that maybe we need an upgrade at quarterback, and took advantage of getting one of the top quarterbacks that was available via trade, and made a trade that makes sense. So I'm going to say that's a big story that we ended off the year and something to build on for 2025. I intentionally put this at the end. It's definitely the biggest news story, Calgary sports story, even one of the top news stories, because even the news sites even throw this in here. Obviously, is what unfortunately happened to Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. So obviously, rest in peace to both Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. I made a video going to the makeshift memorial at the Saddledome after just less than 48 hours after the unfortunate tragic accident happened, and made some video on that. And I did make a video recently talking about that. I think ultimately the Calgary Flames should retire his number, but it was not the right time, I would say, with the family. But just, how the hockey world, especially here in Calgary and in Columbus, Ohio, how the fans, paid their respects, and how everything around it, the pregame. I know some might debate it's getting a little much, but it's that thing that happens in sports with our profile athlete. And unfortunately, this could happen to Joe somebody and won't get the same attention, but it's still, you have to feel about everything involved and all the family and that. And actually, I did see recently, if you follow the Gaudreau family, Madeline, which is the wife of Matthew Gaudreau, she was expecting, and she was due to give birth, and they named the son Trip already. Apparently, she just recently gave birth to Trip Gaudreau in a few days ago, so I think it was just after Christmas, not too sure. But I think that's one of the reasons why Madeline wasn't at the game when Calgary played Columbus earlier in December, because she was expecting. Not too sure the timeline on the third kid, that Meredith, when she announced that she was pregnant with the third child of Johnny. But obviously that is the biggest story, Calgary sports story of the year. I did go to the makeshift memorial, made my video. I didn't go during the actual ceremony because it was getting later in the day in the crowd, but I did watch the live stream of the Calgary Flames. I did watch the live stream that the Columbus Blue Jackets had as well, and both fan bases were obviously shocked and sad and had all the emotions associated with their player. I still say, Johnny Gaudreau didn't leave here on the best of terms, but he definitely deserved, the love and support that he had with the Calgary Flames, from the Calgary Flames. And I did my little part, and my video's on there, and apparently of all the pictures of the makeshift memorial was made in a digital book that's hopefully it's somewhere in the Gaudreaus. But that's the biggest story by far. But I had to touch on the other ones because you knew that was the biggest Calgary sports story for 2024. So now, who do I crown as the Calgary Team of the Year? Well, considering this is my first time doing this, and the fact that 2 championships were won, and this was also inspired when I worked at the St. Trojans in 2010. We had a very successful year that year with teams going to nationals and winning championships. I have to give 2 crowns. Obviously, I got to give it to the Calgary Canucks for winning the AJHL championship, but I also got to give it to the Cavalry FC for winning the CPL championship. So my Calgary teams of 2024 is the Calgary Canucks and the Cavalry FC. You can't dispute it given the championships won. The Flames didn't make the playoffs. However, I think they are making strides, and I think if they progress the right way, we would be a contender in a couple of years, ideally, when we're about to close out the Saddledome and move into Scotia Planks. Supposed placement, say, Stampeders. Well, we'll see what we do in the off season, but I think we upgraded at quarterback. Calgary Hitmen is looking better this season. It's a hit or miss when we're talking about junior hockey and 16 to 20-year-olds. Calgary Roughnecks, I don't know. We did start off 2-0 on the road, but lost the home opener, and we looked like we were outplayed. There were some controversial calls in that game, and we're definitely missing CBD. Wranglers are looking promising. We'll see how things continue going into 2025. So I'm going to say at least with the Hitmen and the Wranglers. I'm not going to bet or guarantee it I'm going to say there'll at least be some playoff hockey at the Dome. Flames, they're on the bubble, but I think they're going to just miss. That's my personal opinion. And then, the Calgary Canucks are still competitive right now. If you follow the Calgary sports scene, we'll see next spring and summer about the Surge. And then same with the Calgary FC, how they're going to build off from last season and how they do in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So yeah, that's my year in review for 2024 from a Calgary sports point of view. How did you feel all the teams that I talked about did this season, and what were your other big stories? Or I probably touched them all. I mean, the biggest one is obvious, but yeah, this will be my last video upload for 2024, but I still plan to make some more content going into 2025. I always got to do my Calgary sports when I can, but I want to still be able to do my non-sports when I can, and then hopefully I can finally get around to, I'm still going to have to batch record the one video series that I plan to do looking back on the Calgary Flames 2004 Stanley Cup playoff run, which is going to turn 21 in 2025. Man, that's a long time ago. So that's all I have for the year review. So as a close out, as I always like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I have my other social media links down in the description below. Hopefully you have a happy new year. Stay safe out there in 2024 going into 2025. I personally always like to stay home for New Year's. That way I'm safe and fine and be able to make this video. I already did have my celebratory cigar for wrapping up the year, and I just had pop because I'm middle-aged now. I'm getting old. I don't want to feel like crap going into 2025 when eventually it's time to really put everything away and get back to normal and face reality again, because my winter break is going to be wrapping up after the weekend, and like I say, I get back at it January 6th, so that's probably why my content's going to slow down some more after that, because still got the day job and all that. Still like to do this on the side, and still hope to be back in 2025, so I'm going to say let's go Calgary Sports. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.